Welcome back after lunch. I hope the unconference, the media track, was rewarding. First up today, in the afternoon track, we have a bit of a legend from the world of innovation and design. Runs a fantastic blog and is also the editor of Design Innovation at Business Week. I'm talking, of course, about Bruce Nussbaum. Please give him a round of applause. Welcome. I sat down before you, I'm sorry.
No, be my guest. Yeah, sure. Good.
We were going to be a bit quiet.
Yeah, let's quiet down a little bit. I'm still hungover.
What did you do last night?
Well, we had a bit of dinner. It was a wonderful dinner, and a lot of, you guys drink a lot here. So I'm a little slow today, but having fun.
Right.
Yeah.
So there are a number of people in this room who regard you as a hero.
Oh.
But in the unlikely event that there might be a handful who are not as familiar with the name Bruce Nussbaum, in a tweet, who are you?
I'm a person who's living life in beta, like the rest of us, searching for some truths about a very strange life that we all lead now, which is always in chaos. And I do that in the space of design and innovation. Does that work for you?
That's good.
Yeah?
Life in Beta, that's the name of your blog. And in
Yeah.
almost 4 years ago, you wrote an entry called "We All Live Life in Beta."
Yeah.
Now.
Yeah.
Tell us more about that.
So, we live in a very strange time now. Usually, over the course of, let's say, a century, you have a major change, some technological change or a political change. It's big, and we adjust to it, we get used to it. There's another change. It's linear. It's fairly slow. But right now, there are enormous disruptive changes all happening at the same time. And they're causing us to live in a very chaotic and very uncertain life. And let me tell you the 5 that I think are the most important, okay?
Yes.
So, and there may be more. We should talk about that. But for me, there are 5 disruptive forces all happening at the same time, all cascading and all driving us crazy. So one is the rise and fall of nations. We all know about that. The rise of Asia, decline of you-know-who. And the rise and fall of generations. I'm a boomer and we're fading away. Perhaps not fast enough, but we're fading away. And the rise of the millennial generation, Gen Y. Second huge force changing the world. And then social media technology, we just heard about it. Hugely powerful, transforming our culture and certainly the culture of anyone under 30. That's where they live, social media. Then of course we have sustainability as a necessity, global warming. And the 5th is urbanization. Last year, the year before, first time in history that more people on the planet lived in cities than not. It's an enormous effect. It's sort of happening under the radar. We don't really talk about it very much, or maybe we're not talking about it enough, but there are 5, those for me are the 5 major forces of global disruption that are occurring at the same time, and that is making life so uncertain that all the old methods, all the old practices, whether you're in a corporation or you're in a hospital or what have you, they're all being disrupted and changed. And we're having to deal with it at the same time. So, welcome to life in beta.
Like a lot of people talk about the perfect storm as well, right? But life in beta I like. It sounds we're in a constant beta testing.
Yeah, beta testing.
But let's go through. So force number 1, the rise of some nations, the fall of others. You wrote a blog earlier this year, Innovation Shifts to Asia and Europe Away from the US. What's your claim?
Yeah.
And it's a claim of many these days. What do you see happening, and is it as simple as East versus West?
Well, I usually talk with my hands, so...
Please do.
Okay.
I can hold you a glass.
No, okay. That's good here. Actually, I would explain it this way. I think there's been a diffusion of innovation away from the West. That is, there's plenty of innovation going on in the US and in Europe. But for the first time in quite a while, there's innovation, big time innovation happening in places like India, which is occurring and having a large impact on us and will have a large impact on us. For example, uh, business model innovation is really big in India, okay? Bigger in India than I would say in the US. Um, there are new ways, there are new hospitals delivering eye care in India with a completely different business model. There are new ways of the Tata Nano car was developed in a very, very different business model. They call it frugal innovation, and it is the type of change that's occurring within very tight constraints. Um, and now you're seeing companies like GE and others that are doing innovation in India and bringing it back to the US. So there's a network, I'm teaching at Parsons these days, and one of the professors there has put together a network of local design and innovation consultancies in India, in Mexico, in Brazil, in South Africa, in China, that are doing incredibly good innovation work, good design work. Um, and they're local, you know, they're not American or European companies, they're locally based. And their stuff is now, I'm guessing, over the next couple of years will be coming back into the US and maybe back into Europe as well. That's not to deny that there's a lot of innovation going on at the US. I think there's tons of it. Perhaps not at the big corporate level, I think much lower. At the entrepreneurship level, startup companies, and students, you know.
Don't we? Oh, you said a lot of things there. Isn't there a problem when we come into the word nations? I've showed the innovative chart before, and
That's,
of course.
by the way, that chart is really full of shit. It's just a terrible chart.
But in general, when we say that the U.S. is innovative, we usually mean certain parts, certain individuals, certain companies.
Yeah.
India, you know, I've seen desolate poverty there, worse than anything you'd see anywhere in Europe and the U.S.
Yeah.
So when we say India is innovative, what do we actually mean? That they have certain individuals that have the drive, or that they have institutions that favor that?
Yeah, yeah. But that's true of every culture. I mean, there are parts of Sweden, I assume, and parts of Europe where you have a lot of innovation, and there are other parts that are not. I mean, there are always pockets of innovation.
You didn't mention China once here. You don't believe
Well, we
in
should
their-
talk about that because that is a very big issue. You know, is China innovative? There are lots of people who say, well, where's the innovation? You know, they're very good at mass scale production, manufacturing, but where's the new stuff? And my answer is not a lot yet.
They're quickly reaching the top position at the most patents filed. Somebody told me.
Yeah. Patents filed is one of the worst measures of innovation.
Then you end up on the chart that we just saw.
It's ridiculous.
Right.
You know, Japan is number one.
Right.
Maybe 20 years ago. Today, not so.
So you think?
It's a bad measure.
Yeah. Just to bring politics into it, do you think democracy is a prerequisite for innovation?
Oh, that is a really good question.
Isn't it?
Wow.
I don't think it's mine. I think I stole it off of somebody. What do you put your hands up? Let's have an audience
let's
poll.
ask the audience.
Do you think democracy is an important part of creating innovation, the roots of innovation? Put your hand up now. If you don't think so, thank you. If you don't think so, put your hand up now. I'd say slightly in favor of democracy, but we're also in a democracy. People might be, we've been doing this somewhere else, people go, no, we don't need it. Who needs?
Well, you know,
the king is good.
So let's play with this just a little bit. I mean, the arguments for and what we could see is that if you have freedom to challenge authority, which is usually an essential part of creating something new.
Be the freak, to use them earlier.
Yeah, without going to jail, right?
Right.
So if you're rewarded for that and you come from a culture, and certainly India is a culture where everyone is always fighting and arguing and against authority.
They can't even put a Commonwealth Games together in time.
That's true, but the execution was pretty good. You know, went smoothly once they, you know.
Okay, sorry.
So that's okay.
Back to the plot.
So in that sense, but we also see, I mean, you know, we forget that Sputnik came out of dictatorship, right? And the whole Russian space program was way ahead of everyone else. So there are instances where you have perhaps technological progress and perhaps certain kinds of innovation within a more authoritarian regime. I would argue that it places limits on innovation. Let me put it that way. And now if you compare, if I were to compare China and India, I would definitely say that India is proving to be much more innovative at this point in time. And going forward, you know, if you don't have Google in China, if you're afraid if you say the wrong thing and you get locked up, how far can you go? I think it may place some limits on innovation, but, you know, it's still an open question.
I mean, you brought up as your fourth force here, the climate change and so on.
Yep.
Some people argue that if the climate change hypothesis is true and we actually need to act, it would be better to have a dictator in place saying, cap, you know, tax, done, than have a democracy where people argue, is it really true, denying, saying yes, no, you know, so on. That would, so are there certain types of challenges where perhaps democracy is at a disadvantage?
Maybe true, but not in this case. And the U.S. is a wonderful example where the political system is clearly broken and nothing's happening, right? Certainly nothing is happening on global warming and sustainability and may not happen for, I don't know, another generation. Who knows whether that's going to get fixed. But below that, when you're looking at the whole Gen Y generation, millennial generation, sustainability is integral to everything that they do. It is part of their life. It's part of the way they live. If you look at various cities, New York, Portland, San Francisco, there's an awful lot happening below that Washington level. That is very, very much an effort to deal with sustainability. So culturally, I would argue that at least on the coast and a lot of cities in the U.S., there's an acceptance of the issue and the problem, and a lot of action towards solving that.
Right.
Whereas the democracy at the Washington federal level is not acting at all. It's broken. So
what has happened? Because we seem to have many more democratic systems, politics being broken. Now, you mentioned the U.S., but we can mention several European nations who are mired in a kind of stalemate, or where we see the real power resides elsewhere.
Yeah.
Whereas you see many kind of both so-called emerging markets, some more democratic, some less so, seeming more vibrant in their politics and what they can do and what they can do with that. What do you think? Is the USA going through a midlife crisis? Will we come out stronger, or are we seeing, you know?
Well, you know, I'm old enough to have gone through several of these cycles.
Right.
So, you know, when I was a kid, late 50s, early 60s, every week we had a drill, a nuclear war drill, where we had to go under our desks and basically hide under our desks, just in case a bomb went off in New York City. Shaking your head, did you do this here? I'm not sure. So we had to do that in case the Russians bombed us. Of course, if they had bombed us, being under your desk wasn't going to do anything, but so we went through that. And then that threat, bye-bye, you know, it's gone. In the 70s, OPEC, price of oil went up 4 times. OPEC not only had all the oil, it was taking all our money. And OPEC was going to bury us, but that didn't happen. And in the 80s, Japan was buying Rockefeller Center and all our golf courses. That was a terrible mistake. You know, never buy, you know, American golf courses. That really got us, you know, mad. And in 10 years, Japan is no longer a threat. So now it is all about, you know, China. And so, you know, you can never history, but you never know.
We think about the future, but we're really extrapolating the present, in essence.
Yeah.
In those situations.
And you worry about it, but
now let me just,
who knows?
because I know I mentioned the word design here before, and I can only assume nobody in here, we're well tuned in, but the rest is, when Swedish politicians talk about design, they mean fancy glassware, you know, heritage, and possibly something you put on a handbag.
Yeah.
And you hate the word design. You'd like to call it bananas. Bani Banerjee told me.
I like bananas better than design, but for the same reason, because American CEOs really, you know, to this day, they're mostly men, right? A lot of them have military backgrounds, Marines and Army. You say design to them, and they think it's something their wives do, and they buy drapes. They just hate the word design.
Right.
You say innovation to them, yeah, that's great. It sounds very, you know, strong and engineering and military. So they'll go for innovation, even though most of the innovation process is really design. So, you know, it depends on the culture. For me, I went from using design to innovation. Innovation has its limitations. Design has its limitations. You know, creativity is something that I'm looking into. It's an old term, but your creativity is something that we sort of all can agree is something good that we're willing to participate in. You could get CEOs involved in that. You could get parents involved in that. So I'm sort of
But
leaning toward that.
right, but
It doesn't matter, you know,
like
it's just a
Professor
word.
Rehn said, you can still use the same words and decide for yourself what they mean. But
Yeah.
the issues you just discussed here with democracy, innovation, nations, what do they have to do with the design word, the way you define it, the way you think about it?
You're asking good questions.
Well, there might
So
be.
there is a real relationship between democracy and design as it has evolved, which is very collaborative. We've moved from design being almost always the result of individual genius to a more evolved process, design thinking, which is much more collaborative, teams, social media. And in that sense, it has become more democratized in the process. Also at the same time, because of Max and because of a lot of other things, people have the tools now to actually do a lot of design. Again, I don't know the situation here in Sweden, but do-it-yourself, DIY, is really big in America now. The ability to make things, craft is coming back into the U.S. So the process of the ideal of design has become quite democratized outside the design profession. So we have two trends, you know. We have design itself becoming more collaborative, in that sense more democratic, and the diffusion of design and the desire to do design and create things, make things, making it more democratic. So there's
Right,
a
I got that
real connection there.
it's a tool and it's a process,
Yeah,
see you saying.
it's really very good.
I'm getting a lot of questions here. So a lot of people want to know about Sweden. Your view, some people said, what happened to Swedish innovation? See something magnificent happening 50, 100 years ago, but not anymore. From your point of view, being an American, what can Sweden as a place do better, different?
Oh, you know, you're putting me in a tough spot.
Ah, I'm
I've been here
sorry.
2 days and I'm hungover. So,
Speak of Sweden as a brand then.
well, let me speak a little bit about what I see as potential and opportunity. Um, you know, the Swedish brand of authenticity, of sort of natural, organic materials, of just that, which is what we see in the U.S. That's what's coming at us. Uh, is a perfect fit for the new kind of culture that's arising. That's part of the whole sustainability culture. You know, it's back to it's more back to nature. It's more back to simplicity. More back to
Where do you live?
huh?
Where do you live?
I live in New York City.
I was going to assume it was a cosmopolitan,
Well,
well-to-do area. I don't
this
see.
is all very true, but you know, I teach at Parsons,
Right.
and I have to say that there's a very powerful youth culture in the U.S. that is very, very much like this. You know, being a farmer is high prestige in the U.S. now.
So it's been in France for decades.
Yeah, but never in the U.S. Okay, so there is sort of a return to and it's sort of a meeting of cultural values that I think are reflected very well in a lot of the things that Sweden does, or at least exports.
Right. That's interesting.
Is that good enough?
It is an answer.
It is. It is a one answer. So,
Somebody also
yeah.
asked, to your point here about, we've taken all the challenges down. We stared down the OPEC and then Japan and so on. Oil running out is a common alarmist claim being made.
Yeah. Why is that alarmist?
Well, the scenario, it's usually not possibility-driven people who says, yes, it's running out, and what a great time, it's it's running out and we'll have nothing and we'll all be living in that movie The Road, or the book The Road by Cormac McCarthy.
That's a good song.
What do you, I mean, do you think about this issue?
Yeah, all the time. I mean, seriously. You know, you're talking about switching from one energy base to another. And in doing so, saving the planet. And also generating an enormous number of jobs and growth along the way. To me, it's completely logical. It's a question of pricing,
But
and it's a
don't we
question of
have?
this,
But
and
don't we have? When we do that, because a lot of people are talking about this.
everybody's talking about it.
We're creating first. I'm trying out the scenario,
Go ahead.
hypothesis. We're trying out. We're creating a dichotomy, like saying oil, no oil, no oil, oil, no oil. It's
Yeah,
hard to say. Um, Whereas usually it's more gradual, right? Today you can do a lot more with a pint of oil than you could do 30 years ago, and you
sure.
can do more. So there's a productivity, so it might be phased out. The Stone Age didn't end because we ran out of stones.
Yeah,
Hypothesis.
yeah,
Um, Secondly, there's always this belief that it's oil. Everything oil is wrong, and oil is bad, and oil is wrong. And if we can only get rid of that, we will be living in utopia, and people will be singing and so on, and Saudi will become a democracy, and everything will be happy.
yeah.
But that's probably not going to be the case, is it?
It never is it?
No.
Although perhaps the U.S. won't be in Iraq or
No, right.
Middle East and doing its thing.
No, right.
So look, this process has been going on for a long time.
Yeah,
OPEC
absolutely.
raised the price of oil in the 70s, and I think there is an acceleration now because you have the rise. Fareed Zakaria's book, The Rise of the Rest.
Mhm.
When you have India and China, basically, a third of the world's population, becoming consumer nations, that is a dramatic disruption of the demand for oil. That is going from this way to that way. So all the talk about oil supplies changes dramatically. Now, they
But
are
we did say the
Yep.
same thing about arable land, right? We'd said there's so many of us, we won't have enough food, we're going to have to grow crops. And then
Yeah.
because we forgot innovation and productivity,
Yep.
which
All
meant
this
that
is true.
we can have almost the same percentage of land being farmed, but feeding millions and millions more.
In the 70s, there was this whole thing about limits to growth, right?
Right. And
that-
Malthus back in the
and
1800s.
old Malthus and all that. And a lot of that turned out not to be true.
Where do
So,
you stand in these questions? Are you the person saying, let's move, phase out oil, solve the carbon dioxide challenge, or are you more of a pragmatist, capitalist, saying, well, when it's cheap enough, I'll jump onto the technology, or where do you stand as a design
That's a very,
innovation philosopher?
How would I put it? Everyone wants to be a pragmatist. And I think actually the most pragmatic thing to do today would be to end all the subsidies that we give to oil exploration and energy, which have amounted to trillions of dollars over the years, which we tend to forget, and to be shifting those subsidies to, alternative energy supplies.
Right.
Wouldn't cost us anything. You're just shifting the subsidies, and I think that, in fact, would be the more pragmatic approach.
Okay.
So I'm wrapping myself in I'm not being utopian. I'm being very pragmatic here, and I think we should move off and move into the future.
That's
Oil is
great.
really the past, and it's troublesome.
Well, it's fossilized dinosaurs, so it's literally the past.
And it's also, in terms of the U.S. has gotten us into many wars in the Middle East, and it's crazy. So for
We're
all
talking
kinds
about
of reasons.
weighty issues here, so I love it.
Yeah, I know. We're
Um,
going to talk about design.
What is innovation?
What is innovation?
Yes.
Innovation is the transformation of invention into valuable services, products that people can use.
How do you measure it?
How do you measure innovation?
Yes.
Why do you want to?
Well, because you said the chart here was crap, and just because you're a professor and Alpha's a professor, I find myself agreeing because I have an academic complex. But so how would we measure it then?
Academic complex.
How would we measure it? Number of coffee breaks per capita.
You can. That's not bad. There are any number of measures. You can measure the number of startup companies. You can measure the number of new products or services that are coming out. You can measure. I mean, those are very. If you want hard measures like that, you
Right.
could do that, or you can, back into certain kinds of inventions. I don't know. It doesn't bother me.
No. But
No.
it bothers me a bit because I'm finding there's a battle of words. We said that design should be called bananas. Chief executives love innovation, but I always find that if
Chief executives don't love innovation.
no,
Let me give you
they're
a
starting to
Well, they're
Or-
starting to blah 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 about
Yeah,
innovation
talk
and
about
design,
it.
but and again, I don't know the situation in Sweden or in Sweden, but there was a new NSF report, National Science Foundation report, which is a good, National Science Foundation is neither left nor right. It's solid. That showed that for publicly traded companies in the U.S., between the years 2006 and 2008, so it was before the Great Recession. 9%, 9% of US corporations had any product or process innovation. Okay? So there's been a great myth about innovation in America, at least in terms of large corporations. There has been very little of it. What has taken place has mostly been down below. The beginnings of new companies, startups, entrepreneurship. But in terms of large corporations, CEOs have blah, 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 and done very little. What they have done, I'll tell you, is outsource. And that's one of the reasons why the US is in this pickle. You know, we've basically sucked out the jobs for the middle class in manufacturing and not replaced them. They've talked a lot about innovation and creativity and all kinds of new industries, but there has been very little of it. And that's the nature of the crisis. That's the nature of the political crisis. That's why we have Tea Party, blah, blah, blah. So, sorry to be very serious,
That's good.
but this is a very serious, that is the greatest challenge for the US. You know, whether to replace these large corporations with smaller ones that are growing, that provide the jobs, or somehow transform these corporations that talk about innovation and may talk about design, but are doing very little about it.
But don't we have, I mean, I see exactly the same challenge in Sweden. We have been dependent on some big export companies that have promised jobs and security, and they've invested in their local city or town where they've lived, and that it's a different kind of world. It's a world in beta, as you say, and it's hard to sustain that model of enterprise, I suppose.
Yes, it's very difficult. And being creative is very difficult.
Are we witnessing the death of big companies?
I'll tell you what we're really witnessing. Yes. We're witnessing the death of big company CEOs.
Oh.
We're witnessing the death of big company leadership because they haven't adapted.
Right.
To tell you the truth, this is really the truth, okay? The true truth.
The true truth.
No
knowns and no now-knowns and true truths. Okay.
This is the true truth. Top leadership of at least U.S. corporations have had 20 years to become innovative. They've had 20 years to become adaptive, and they haven't. Part of it is a generation, part of it is age, part of it is stubbornness, whatever it is. There are exceptions. There are a lot of exceptions. Sam Palmisano at IBM transformed the, IBM used to be hardware, da-da-da. They're incredibly adaptive. Immelt at GE, P&G. But of all the big companies, you could count them on maybe two hands in the US, maybe your hands and mine. There has been a huge failure of leadership, and they have to go. They really have to be replaced, and I think generation change will deal with it over time. For me, I think the whole idea of one CEO is ridiculous. You need teams. We team up for everything in life these days. You need a team. You need a multi-generational team, multidisciplinary team. You need teams now to lead companies that bring in new expertise, who know something about social media, who know something about this and that.
But I'm thinking there's some leaders here in the room as well, haven't the kind of capitalist model of running an organization always been fairly pragmatic in that sense? Well, social media, when it's interesting enough, we'll put a manager on that. And you get a bit of a committee instead of one individual. Whereas a very successful example, and I hate to say the word because it's boring everybody to death, but Apple. It's really a one-man show, right? More or less.
It's a one-man show. And
it's a Steve Jobs kind of...
You cannot duplicate Apple.
Dictatorially. IKEA, same thing. Immer Kamprad, dictatorially.
Yeah.
Sort of saying it. Wouldn't that be the opposite of what you're saying now? Instead of having more CEOs and XX having just the dictator?
Well, if you could get 1,000 Steve Jobs and, duplicate him.
We have them in this room.
Well, there you go. So we ought to take all these folks and put them into leadership positions, which is not a bad idea. But it's difficult culturally and politically. We need because we live in times that are so uncertain, okay? And because we are living partly at a time when you have two generations that are very, very different culturally, we need change that's much faster than normal. And we're not getting it. We're not seeing a change in leadership of the speed and type that we really need.
So what will happen? A revolution, bloody and battles and Cormac McCarthy stuff,
Well,
or
I think partly we're seeing. I think one of the reasons why you're seeing the decline of the U.S. is because corporate leadership is not adequate. That's a good
Interesting.
quote.
yeah, it is
And I'm
indeed.
being polite by
But
saying
we're going to
adequate.
see that light up Twitter
Yeah.
in no time.
Well, we'll see.
We're almost out of time. I feel like I mean, I guess many of you feel that Bruce is one of those people you want to have several glasses of wine with and share the big secrets of life and society. But let's.
Where'd you get your socks? I thought I had some. You know, check
Oh,
that
it's-
out. Huh? 2 pair of wild socks.
Yeah. Well,
Okay.
yours were like mine, but then they were in the
I've
the
washed
washing
them more
machine
than
for a while.
I guess that's it. Yeah,
so you can only they're disposable.
Yeah.
Um,
So
You-
how about
you
one
new
more
focus-
question? One more really good question.
oh damn. No, but you have a new book coming out.
I have a new book that I just signed
Really?
to do. Yeah.
Oh, what's it about?
It'll be about unpacking creativity. You know, breaking the code of creativity.
And how is it different? How will it help us in these big quests that you really
I
outlined?
can't tell you right now,
Oh, okay.
but it might
That's
be
one
back
of the-
next year, and I'll tell you.
Oh, we would love to have you back.
Yeah.
Let me just double check because there are, we've had questions about key barriers to innovation and things. There's big weighty issues, but I feel we've reached some depth. So people
Okay.
can reach you through your blog, Life in Beta.
Yeah, I'm now blogging on Fast Company.
Oh.
I don't blog on Business Week anymore.
Oh,
They
sorry.
don't cover design. So Fast Company or HBR or whatever.
Wonderful to connect with you.
Yeah. or
Thank you
Twitter.
so much for coming to Good Morning 2020.
Oh.
It's been a true pleasure.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Take
Now
care.
let's see your work. Let's see your work of art over here. Your working art is coming up. It's
Okay.
always fascinating to see what will happen in these works of art.
You never know how people see you, right?
No, or your socks.
Or my socks.
Oh, the
You got
socks
the
are up
socks in
here.
there.
The striped
Oh,
socks are up
fantastic.
there. Here we go.
Oh,
Design equals
beautiful.
bananas. Innovation shift,
Fantastic.
and that could be a smiley face, really.
This is
And-
perfect.
And somebody's well, it's wonderful. It'll be online.
Thank you so much. It's
Thanks
really
so
great.
much,
Thank
and
you.
of course,
the book.
the inspiration for you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Bruce.
Bye-bye. See ya.